I'm just trying to do what's right for John. Our very personal fight we started that summer is going to affect millions of people.
That's Jim Obergefell, the plaintiff in the gay marriage case that made it all the way to the Supreme Court today. The justices hearing those arguments this morning. Jim married his husband in Maryland, but when they moved to Ohio, their union was not recognized because gay marriage is not legal in that state. His husband then died, and Ohio will not consider him a surviving spouse. Recognizing marriages across state lines, one of the issues that the justices are debating. The other is whether to overturn the gay marriage ban that is currently in place in 14 states. This case has huge social and political ramifications, and I want to start with the politics because the smart money seems to be saying that the court is going to overrule the gay marriage ban and make gay marriage legal across the United States. 60+% of Americans now say that they support gay marriage in one form or another, and we've all seen the trend lines just go through the roof because the public has changed its opinion on this amazingly fast. What I want to know is what happens to the Republican Party right now. All of the declared candidates for president are opposed to gay marriage in one form or another. They say the states should decide, or they're just opposed to it on religious lines. How does the GOP respond? And if the court takes this off the table for them, Nan, is that actually a victory for those candidates? Well, it's asked and answered. I don't have to deal with it.
I would say it probably is. And here's what, as a Republican, I would urge members of my party to do, fellow members. View this rightly as a 14th Amendment issue. And we, as a party, stand for personal liberty, right? County executive, we stand for personal liberty and strong families. Well, what the Republican Party now will need to recognize is that it is a matter of personal liberty that people should be able to marry the person they love, and that strong families come in all different varieties, not only straight families, but also gay families, and we should celebrate that.
Why haven't more Republicans taken that view?
You know what? You'd have to ask them. I think a lot of them feel that there are religious precepts that prevent them from embracing that point of view, but I think it is time. Look at in our own state of New York. New York legalized gay marriage a couple of years ago, and the sun still comes up every morning. We haven't experienced the apocalypse. Let's hope we don't. But this is, I hope that the Supreme Court will resolve this in favor of personal liberty and strong families.
Scott, a lot of base voters in the Republican Party, though, have not come to that point of view just yet. And they're stuck for one reason or another on opposing same-sex marriage. Is that what's driving so many Republican candidates to continue opposing it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the religious right controls an enormous amount of votes for primaries and others. And many of those states, or the 14, I think, a lot of that, their base are those voters. And so the presidential candidates are going to be skipping and dancing and jumping and what have you, except for those few. I think Pataki is one of the few that said, look, forget the social issues. We may not win on the social issues because you're going to argue with Hillary Clinton. Stick with the economy, stick with issues of foreign affairs, stick with things that Republicans can argue more effectively about. But I do think there's something interesting about this. The secondary question is, what are states' rights? And Republicans have always felt and argued that state rights are far more valid in many cases than federal oversight and federal rules. I don't see any way in any way that the Supreme Court will not rule that every state must recognize gay marriages from other states. I don't see how you get away from it from a constitutional issue.
That's full faith and credit.
Sure. So you must. So at that point, it opens up the next question. Which, if you've got to accept it from other states, as you would a license or any other things, then the next question becomes, well, why not allow it in your state? And that's where, the back and forth of this is fascinating.
But there's a good chance that the court is basically going to dissolve that issue and say, no, you have to. You have to recognize
Human rights issues supersede states' rights issues constitutionally. That was why we
they're
fought the Civil War.
nuance it. They're going to nuance it because they got a split court. And Kennedy is going to write everybody feels he's going to write the opinion. He has a Republican appointee. But it'll be nuanced, I'm sure. But I think the issue is, if you're married in New York, does it work in Ohio? And the answer constitutionally, under my understanding of it, is it has to.
Well, if it comes down to Kennedy, that's good news for the gay community, right?
Right.
But I'm one of those. I don't I don't know if we can really pay that much attention to the tea leaves that come from the Supreme Court when they have these types of conferences, because sometimes they'll show their hand one way and then rule the other. I do agree, though, that the Republican Party gets in a lot of trouble whenever social issues come up. That's when you get almost trapped in a box, and it may play well to the base.
That's how they don't get beyond a primary.
Right, that's how they get beyond the primary. But I mean, I'm listening to you break this down, Andrew, but it seemed like the court today, in terms of the questioning, had a lot of problems with the possibility of redefining the role of marriage between a man and a woman. And so, I don't know.
And we'll see probably the last week in June when all of this shakes out and we get the decision on this. By the way, probably the same week we get the Obamacare decision. So that buckle your seatbelts. That'll be a lot of fun.
But
yeah.
Here's a thought. It's perfectly legitimate to ask, and this is where I would fall in terms of determining what the role of states is. It's perfectly legitimate to say sanctioning marriage is going to be left to religious institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever people's religion may be. That they can define marriage. Every state must honor the concept of, if you will, a civil union for everybody. You know, in other words, that's you know, hetero, gay, whatever.
But isn't that sort of the division that's at the heart of this case in the first place? I mean, a lot of states have offered civil unions, and a lot of gays and lesbians have said that's not what we want.
Gay couples, not to hetero. What I'm saying is, let every state register your union for official purposes, for legal purposes, and let religious institutions sanction marriages.
Quickly back to the politics.
That respects religious liberty.
I'm going to put you all on the campaigns of Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, and we'll say Rand Paul for the lack of anybody better. Are you hoping the court rules and legalizes gay marriage? Are you hoping they uphold the gay marriage ban? What would you like from a logistical standpoint, from a campaign standpoint?
I hope they legalize it.
Because you don't have to deal with the issue
anymore? You take that off the table. Roe v. Wade is taken off the table, and you deal with the issues that you've got to deal with, the other ones: economy, foreign affairs.
Agree. That's where we think the campaigns would be.
This nation has such urgent problems. Just what we were talking about with regard to the mayhem in Baltimore. We have a young generation that is coming up without hope and opportunity, and it has entirely to do with the economic issues that each of us, regardless of party, has to address together. Let's get these other issues off the table and respect personal liberty and religious freedom.
If I'm running, I want the Supreme Court to legalize, or either way, as a candidate, I can run in support of their decision or against it to energize the base. So as long as they make the decision, the Supreme Court, it takes a whole lot of heat off of me as a candidate.
Isn't that? I mean, I just wonder if that's a really short-sighted approach from a candidate to, let's say they legalize gay marriage across the country. If you're a Republican candidate who then runs against gay marriage and says, well, the court's wrong and what we need to do is get more justices and change the laws and get a constitutional amendment, that really...
A savvy candidate is not going to do that. They're going to say, you know what, it's been decided, then now really we need to concentrate, since the Supreme Court has done this, let's concentrate on those issues, be a real relief for those candidates.
And let's move on.
They'll go on to gun rights and other things that they
Something
can,
less controversial.
Less controversial, more other meat.
That's fantastic. All right, well, we want to make sure that you at home get involved in this conversation. Head over to Facebook, head over to Twitter, sound off on today's question: will the Supreme Court rule that states have to recognize gay marriage? Up next, we're going to move a little closer to home and take a look at some of the problems in Albany. More corruption news to tell you about. In addition to that, though, we've got some interesting developments out of East Ramapo today. We're going to get into some of the state issues when we return.